more time that people are spending in your app, the more valuable your app or service is worth, right? So when we hear about the idea of sticky, what that really means is creating an experience for people where they don't want to leave, right? They keep coming back, they're stuck in your application, they're stuck in your service, and you become an integral part of whatever they're doing, either on a day-to-day or a regular basis, depending on how the level of interaction is needed, right? So today we're going to cover crafting an incredible user experience, but what that really means is what can you do as far as decision making to understand how to better move your clients, your customers, your users, your app users, the people that are viewing your service from one-time interaction to multiple interaction to really never wanting to leave. Right, so when we think about user experience, a lot of times it's lumped together with UI. And the truth is that UI and UX are not the same thing, although they kind of fall under the same umbrella, right? Because if you don't have a UI designer, then whatever your UX team or your UX people come up with, it can't really be implemented, right? Because you interact with the experience through the user interface. So the interface itself is what you see, right? It's the actual styles or fonts or colors. It's what you might choose for animation, how you present your menu, your list, or your details, right? Your user interface is a lot like my shoes, right? My shoes stand out, but they do nothing for you guys. It's just something to look at. Now, when you think about user experience, it's a little bit different. User experience is more about how do you feel? What is it that impresses you about the experience? What is it that made you want to go tell somebody else what you've done, right? So when we think about how to move through user experience, it really doesn't have to do with the look or the feel. It has to do with, can you figure out where your next step is supposed to be, what your next action is supposed to be, or what the goal of being here on this page looking at the information is supposed to be. And if your users are confused, or if the people who are trying to get at your service don't find it easy to move through and navigate the details or options that you're providing, they're not going to stick around to find out more. They're going to put the app down, they might delete it from their phone, but certainly it's going to stay there and not get opened again. And I'm sure every single person in this room has an app on their phone that they haven't opened in 4 months. And if your phone is newer than 4 months, then there's an app on your phone that you haven't opened since you downloaded it, right? So can you easily understand the goal is probably the primary focus of user experience. And it's not the primary experience in making something sticky, but it's mandatory to understand how easy it is to navigate through your app if you want people to stay. Now, the next line item here is what gets in the way. And as developers or engineers, we focus on getting the job done. Can you actually do what you're supposed to do? Not, is it easy, or was it fun? Did people smile when they pressed the button, or did they want to share it? But truthfully, just can you get it done? Now, user experience is something totally different. It's not can you get it done, it's what was it like to achieve that goal? Was there points of friction? Was it really hard? For instance, I've seen people try to use a checkout in an app, and they tell me, after having watched them not be able to check out, that the experience was decent. But and I know, having watched this, that the real experience wasn't decent because they weren't able to achieve the goal readily. Now, they didn't know how to convey that to me. They liked the colors, they liked the animations, they liked the pictures that they saw. But what we saw from watching them use the application was that it's going to be less sticky than they intended, right? Because if it's hard to do or achieve the goals, people aren't going to come back continually to try to achieve them. So when we talk about what is the problem, right, in this user experience world and this creating something that's sticky that people want to come back to, the first thing that you want to think about is, can you make the goals that your user, not your goals, but your user's goals, more clear to them, right? And generally speaking, the answer is yes. We iterate over this all the time. We have A/B testing, all kinds of cool ways to figure it out. But the solution, right, is that you might want to only make one goal per view, or you might want to make it simpler for the user to understand what you've intended them to do. Now, I'll go through a couple of examples of cluttered UI and UX, but the truth is that it all boils down to this one thing. Is what I want to do clear? Can I do it easily? And when it's complete, how did I feel about the process? So if you don't know what your users are supposed to do, and this is on a view, on a list item, on details, if you're not that user yourself, if you're not immersed in it, then it's going to be really hard for you to set the goals for your users to move through. It's going to be very difficult for you to understand what their pain points are, why they feel that way. And user experience being about feeling is more than just about data. It's about understanding what that data leads to and where it can move either interactions, actions, or motions from one place to another, and in simplifying the process of getting from opening your app to achieving that goal. Now, I started out by saying that UI and UX are not the same thing, right? So which is more important? Would you rather have a very plain UI, but something that's super easy to use, or a very elegant and beautiful looking UI, and have it be a little bit more difficult to use as a user? And this is something that we struggle with every day in building apps, websites, interactions, choosing frameworks, CocoaPods, whatever it is that you're doing, right? We struggle with what does it look like versus how easy is it to use? And for me, I don't like to take one or the other, right? It's both. So if you're not focused on both what it looks like and how it feels to use it, it's going to be very difficult to craft this kind of stickiness where other applications are focused both on the design and the experience. And that's not to say those need to be two different people, although it is easier when they're not the same person, right? Because if it's one person, they get to make excuses for themselves that they then reiterate back to you and convince you that it's true. But even if it is one person, it should be two separate and distinct goal sets. One is, can this look nice? And the answer needs to be yes. And the other is, what can I do to make this easier to use? So the first example that I'm going to go through is Facebook Messenger. Facebook is one of the stickiest applications that we've ever seen, right? It actually is the app that we termed the word sticky about, because users go back to it every single day. Some users go back 2, 3, 4 times a day, and knowing that their users are in that space so often, why would they take out a core element and put it into its own application? Well, there's a few reasons for this, right? So the traditional Facebook app, users found it difficult to navigate through Messenger. And I'll show you an example of an image of why I think it was difficult to navigate. But what they saw was that they had competitors who were making it really easy to send messages, to send cool things in messages, and their users were now going to this new application to send their messages. They weren't staying in Facebook Messenger, right? So Messenger itself was able to grow the user base and attract people who were not necessarily interested in the social network aspect, but were interested in the Messenger aspect. It owns the gated content, so they bought WhatsApp, right? But the content now doesn't sit in WhatsApp. They didn't navigate their users to that application. They still own all of the content, which you should know they own all of your content. And they worked to simplify the process. So they took a look at how users were interacting with the Facebook Messenger that was available from within the native app, and they took the parts that were difficult to interact with and made them simpler. Right, so you have easier access to your contacts. They're not listed in some weird version with green dots next to them or phone icons next to them. You can communicate with people that you haven't directly connected with before. They tried to implement phone and video support. That may or may not work. It might be something that users care about. It may not, but this is how you iterate to a better user experience. You try. And with group chat and video support, we found varied levels of success. Some users love video, others won't touch it. Some users love group chat, others never chat with more than one person at the same time. But either way, they've made this Messenger a facility for doing whatever it is that you want to do and not forcing you to interact in the way that they had previously defined. So if we take a look at the Facebook, and it didn't show up as clearly as I'd hoped, but if we take a look at the Facebook version of this, the first thing that you might notice is the background is dark. And that's to distinguish it from the very light background of the Facebook app, but it makes it difficult to use, right? It changes the contrast, and we know already that the human eye prefers white background, black text. So this spits in the face of all of those years of study showing us that white background and black text is easier to see and interact with. Number two, I have pretty big fingers, right? So when I'm in Messenger and I try to click on one of those people, I usually end up clicking on the wrong person, right? Because the rows are smaller than the width of my thumb. And if we take a look at Messenger itself, it starts from a different interaction. Messenger presents you with messages that you've already sent, conversations that you're already in, things that you already care about from the moment you open it. Facebook tries to do the same thing, but they show you your feed. That's what they assume that you care about. So in this case, in moving the application to its own space, to a new application, they were able to say, okay, for our Messenger customers, for our Messenger users, this is what they want to see first. Now, the second thing that I really want to point out is, if you take a look at where settings is on Facebook, it's in the top right corner and it's tiny next to search. Right? You can almost not see that it's there, and it's very easy to miss. But if you take a look at settings on Messenger, it's very clear in the menu bar with the other menu items. So these are the types of things that we're able to test, to rip out and replace to see, will our users find settings if we put it in a more common or expected place? And that's what I'm saying when I get to the point of, is it easy to achieve the goal, or is it harder to achieve the goal? So if I'm looking for settings, there's nowhere on the Facebook Messenger, right, on the left side, that shows me other icons for things that I can do, which means there's no inferred place that I should be looking for settings. By contrast, if I take a look at Messenger itself, there's a whole row of icons where all of the things that I want to do are set. So it's very easy for me to figure out, I want to move from this space to that space to that space to achieve this specific goal. Now that might be group chat, it might be changing my settings, it might be taking a look at who's online. But either way, those are all available for me in the same place. The difference between user interface and user experience is exampled very well from the Uber case, right? So the user experience is about knowing what your wait time might be, being able to watch that car drive down the street so that you can see it arriving, right? But seeing who your driver is and a picture is user interface. The idea of knowing your driver before they arrive is user experience. The user experience goes on to say, we took a look at what was wrong or what the users of cabs didn't like, right? And one of them is that awkward tipping moment. So now they don't say you can't tip your drivers. What they say is our tip is built in, right? Because for you as the user, it's comfortable. For the driver, it's comfortable and acceptable. And now everybody's happy, and we've actually removed a point of friction. We've removed the layer that says, how much should I tip somebody? What is customary? That's all predefined, so you don't need to make those decisions. They're not points of friction any longer. We've just ripped them right out. Surge price is displayed prior to making a decision. If you hop in a cab today, and it's incredibly crowded on the road, right? That's a pretty common thing here in San Francisco. You might not know how long it's going to take you to get from one place to another. And the cab is going to charge you based on time and based on the distance gone. With Uber, they tell you very much up front, this is the price, even if it's higher than you were expecting. And for a consumer who's price conscious, or who might make the decision to take a train instead of a cab based on a $5 increase, that is a huge difference. Now, the case study that I'd like to do here is Match.com. So when I was younger, online dating was something that was taboo and that nobody would admit, right? People were embarrassed to say that they were on something like Match or whatever their competition might have been, and the competition isn't the issue. But Match.com did something that was incredible. They took a look at their own user experience, and although they did it through acquisition, they took a look at what was wrong with what they were doing and found ways to make it much easier, much better, and essentially found themselves owning applications that were far stickier than the one that they had created themselves. Okay, so the user experience of Match was the most and is the most complicated of the services that I've mentioned here, right? So they have a complicated filtering system. In the beginning, you didn't know if somebody was online or not, so you didn't know if you were going to expect a response readily, or maybe they'd sign in 10 days from now, who knows. There was no real proximity search, right? So you could go by like maybe the zip code that you were in or your city name, but it certainly couldn't tell you that somebody was X amount of miles or feet from where you currently were. That was from your registered location, right? If I was in California, but my home base was in Fort Lauderdale, matches that were geographically in proximity would be to my Fort Lauderdale address. The biggest problem that Match.com had was that men were able to send indiscriminate messages that flooded the system, right? So their female users started to walk away, and there was an imbalance in the system. And eventually what they realized was unless there was a balance in the system, both sides of the user stopped coming and left the application, and it wasn't sticky anymore. Their first acquisition was Hot or Not. And for some of you in the audience, you might be too young to remember Hot or Not, but this was not necessarily a dating application. This was simply a website where you could post your own picture, something that you had posted to Facebook, or back then there was MySpace too, right? I think Friendster was gone by this point. But basically the idea was that you could get rated by the crowd, and people would tell you which images that they thought were the sexiest, essentially allowing you to figure out which profile pictures you should choose to put on your online dating application. They didn't do the dating, they just did the rating. But what Match.com saw, right, was that in binary decision making, it took almost all of that complication away, and users continued to stay in the application. They continued to stay in the application beyond the time that their geographic location or their zip code had gotten them returns here, and that people were rating pictures of other users from as far away as other countries and readily happy to do it. They didn't need the same kind of connection that the Match experience provided, but these users were staying in the application often, and for a long time, and they came back often. So the problem was with Hot or Not, right, is that the people you match with, they might not be close in proximity. If you rated them hot and they rated you hot, that was it, and you got a woo, awesome. But that was pretty much it, and you couldn't really capitalize on the engagement, and it kind of left right then and there, right? And there was only one picture per decision. So it wasn't really like a dating application or a matchmaking system in any real sense of the way from the company Match was looking at it. It was more like, I'm gonna put up a picture and I'm gonna see if other people like this picture as much as I think they will. And if they do, then I'll use it in my own profile, in my own marketing, in my own messaging. But if they don't like it, well, that's fine, and we'll just move on. Multiple pictures could show up from the same user, but they wouldn't show up in order. So it wasn't like you were sifting through some person's profile or life. It was more like this was a random distribution of images that you could rate, and it was a game, not a connective service. So Match really needed some way to apply this kind of binary decision making, the stickiness, to what they were doing in the online dating world, right? And in comes Tinder. So before Tinder was available, it was almost hard to admit that you were in the online dating world, right? It was one of those things that like you shied away from talking to your friends about, and maybe some people knew if they happened to come across your profile, but certainly if you met somebody online and you started dating, you'd like make up a story about how you met each other, right? And you'd like lie to your friends, your closest friends, and maybe one at a time you'd take them aside and be like, yeah, we met online. But it was like really taboo and kind of looked down upon. But all of a sudden Tinder pops up, and it's so sticky that people don't care when others see them using it. As a matter of fact, it became so sticky that they would brag about using it and be like, yo, look at who I matched on Tinder, or like at work, match, I'm killing it on Tinder. That's really not killing it on Tinder, but you get my point. Well, the point being is that the users of this application came back so often and stayed for so long that even though it didn't provide the traditional Match.com sense of a match, it really made business sense for this company to take a look at the user experience. And the user experience that changed was that it connected you, number one, with people who were around you. So it wasn't just a binary rating system. It was actually a request to meet somebody, right? But it included real-time location. So it wasn't just based on the zip code that you had put in your profile or the address that you were used to logging in from, right? It was actually where you were in time and space. And for people who travel, for people who move around, I'm from Fort Lauderdale, so maybe we party in Fort Lauderdale, maybe we party in Miami, maybe we party in West Palm Beach. This kind of interaction allowed us to open the app and use it even when we weren't on our desktop, right? Because it provided an experience that actually utilized the location of the device that we were on. And in doing that, it allowed really drunk people to spend long sessions of time rating others at a bar. And that's what you found, right? Is that instead of going up to random people and actually introducing yourself and meeting them, people were relying now on this interaction on a device that they were holding in their hand, hiding away from the rest of society, waiting for that thing to provide the interaction or introduction to people. And that's what Match.com saw as sticky, right? Instead of deciding to be with a real person in real space, you are now choosing to avoid the real people in real world space, to enjoy this virtual description of somebody that they had crafted for themselves. So Tinder comes and Tinder goes, and at this point in time, it's kind of hard to read there, but in 2014, which is before Bumble existed, right? Match.com, the Match Group, as they're called today, was worth about $888 million. So you can imagine by 2015, even if nothing changed, they were probably worth $1 billion. And all that meant was they were able to capitalize on enough people who wanted to come back to their, can't call it a website, we call it properties, right? Whether it's Match.com, Hot or Not, or Tinder, and spend time using those applications. So Match.com charges, Hot or Not doesn't, Tinder didn't either. But yet the company was raising in its valuation because the users weren't leaving the app. They were choosing to open it at work. They were choosing to open it in the bathroom. They were choosing to open it just after they got out of the shower, before they got dressed. They were choosing to walk away from dinner and interact with this app instead of dealing with their friends who were live in front of them and drinking together, right? So at $188 million, they're doing something right. And what they did was acquire other organizations that had a better, stickier, and more useful interface or experience so that they could capitalize on those eyes and that time. Right now, Tinder is being run away from in droves, right? Because you can chat if you find a mutual connection, but it actually ended up having a very similar problem to the original Match.com problem, which is guys are idiots. They say things that they should never say, and they feel like because you're behind a computer or this mobile device that nobody's ever going to find out that you're a dick, right? But that's just not the case. As soon as you're a dick, people know it. And where dicks congregate, right? Other people who don't want to be around it don't stay. If you're in a bar and everybody in the bar is annoying to you, you're not going to stay there, right? You might stick around for happy hour during those drink specials, the sticky part, the thing that's meaningful to you. But as soon as that meaningful interaction to you is over, you're leaving and you're not coming back, and you're not paying attention to those people. Tinder had the very same problem, right? As soon as the high-value targets left, right, the low-value targets followed suit. And it's just the way that business works. As soon as something is no longer trending and people understand the problems, the issues, the exploitable edge cases, those edge cases get exploited over and over and over again, and the system collapses. In comes Bumble. Now, I don't know if the Match Group is going to buy Bumble. It's just an assumption of mine based on their track record that this is an acquisition target for them. But this is the next evolution in the online dating world that fits the exact same model. So Bumble is not a reinvention of the wheel. It's nothing new. It's actually almost exactly the same as the Tinder application. There's only one slight difference. Bumble understood their users well enough to know that the problem was these indiscriminate men who were making stupid decisions when they were drunk about what they were going to say to potential mates, right? And maybe they weren't drunk. Maybe they were just really, really, off the wall, and this is what they thought was a good idea in order to spark up a conversation and be unique. But in trying to do that, they offended whoever they were actually talking to. Bumble's solution was to allow you to match in the same exact way, but instead of allowing the men to be the first interaction, the woman needs to take the first action. She needs to send the first message. So they eliminated the ability for anybody to actually do that one problematic action from within Tinder, and in it created a whole new ecosystem that has the same kind of stickiness, a better, stronger user base, and a higher valuation than its predecessor. Now, I don't know if Match is actually going to buy this company, but it would make total sense that they would. Either that or implement some kind of feature like this in Tinder, because truthfully, it really wouldn't be that hard. Now, how do you find your user's problem? That's a really difficult one to discuss because every one of the apps that you create is going to be different. Every one of the websites that you have is going to serve a different purpose. You might use heat maps. You might try to find where people are touching or try to look at where their eyes scan on the website. But realistically, you need to be able to interface with your customers, and you need to have a way for your customers to reach you directly. So that whole stickiness thing was to say, you need to focus on having the ability for your customers or your users to not leave the application, and that's even in customer support. So I'd be remiss if I didn't try to pitch you our product, right, which is, it allows exactly that. It allows your annoyed customers, your frustrated customers, your annoyed users to contact you directly to tell you what the problem is. Because as much information as you can get from a heat map or the readability score, you're not going to find the worst problem that way. Because the worst problem isn't where people are avoiding clicking. It's something that your users are doing. And the only way to find that out is to allow your users to connect with you on a direct level. So whether it's our service or otherwise, you need to have some way to reach out and validate that your customers are happy and that they enjoy using your service in a way where there are no points of friction. If there are points of friction, eliminate them and make it simpler to use. Sorry guys, my time is up.